Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this afternoon, before I get into the topic, I'm just asking you to like the videos and to subscribe to the channel so that we can grow. Now, the topic of today, the title of my video today is, does Dr. Andrew Holness, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, have dictatorial bearings or leanings? Does Andrew Holness want to become a future dictator of Jamaica? That's a very important question that we should be asking ourselves in light of what is happening in Jamaica and sometimes statements made by Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness. But there was a statement that was made by the Prime Minister recently, and the Gleaner carried that story yesterday, June 15th, 2025, published in the Jamaica Gleaner. Holness, and this is what Holness said, this is his words, verbatim. JLP doesn't need an opposition. Our supporters hold us accountable. So the Prime Minister is suggesting that the PNP as an opposition party, the JLP doesn't need them because his party base, his followers, are the ones who hold him accountable, not the country at large. Now, what is the purpose of an oppositional party? That is the question we should be asking. Isn't it supposed to be challenging the incumbent government and to ensure that they are fulfilling their obligations and their promises to the Jamaican people? Now, when we talk about PNP and JLP, we must understand that whoever becomes Prime Minister of Jamaica and not the JLP or the PNP, because they are managing the resources of the country. So while Dr. Andrew Holness might be the leader of the JLP and Prime Minister at the same time, he must understand that his primary obligation is to govern the people of Jamaica. And that is why, according to our democratic processes, whatever is left of it, we have two major political parties, the People's National Party and the Jamaica Labour Party. And that is how the system of what they call the so-called democracy works in Jamaica. Until he reformulates and rewrites the Constitution, he cannot be suggesting that he does not need an opposition. The JLP doesn't need an opposition. Who is Dr. Andrew Holness to be making these claims? Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness argued Sunday that Jamaica Labour Party supporters are the administration's most constructive critics, unlike some followers of the opposition People's National Party, whom he suggested are not informed. Right? So his party is the only one that is informed. And we have to be careful in light of what happened 5 years ago when they were selling their medical product and you could not disagree with them, because if you disagreed, they are the only ones who knew about science and what science entailed. We have to be careful when politicians make these statements and who is diffusing misinformation and disinformation and malinformation. Once you are not agreeing with their diktats and their ideology, it means therefore that you are diffusing misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And by the way, malinformation means that you can be right, but if what you're saying poses a threat to the government's agenda, the agenda that the government is pushing, then you can be censored because you are threatening the agenda of a government, even though what you have said is right. So malinformation, make no bones about it, because the word mal there ironically means bad. When somebody talks about mal in Spanish, all right, it means bad. But in what they have suggested, based on what we're getting coming out of the Pentagon, malinformation is information that is correct, but poses a threat to the reigning governments or the agenda of the ruling class. So it has to be rooted out, it has to be eliminated, it has to be eradicated. It has to be suppressed. And that is what we hear the Prime Minister suggesting, that if you are not on the GLP side, then you are spreading, you are diffusing misinformation and disinformation. You are not properly informed. This is what the Prime Minister of Jamaica is suggesting here. Now, some people will say, well, he's only being political and he's using that sort of platform to cement his role as the future victor in the next general election. But we have to also be on guard of what they say and hold their feet to the fire, lest they mean what they say. Because remember now that Lord Action said, and he's correct, that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And Andrew Holness is he's running for a third term in office, a third consecutive term in office as Prime Minister. So when they're there and they feel themselves, as we would say in our local parlance, he feels that he's important and he's more important than the Jamaican people or some of the Jamaican people. Because if he suggested that only members of his party give him constructive criticisms, and therefore he does not need to hear anything coming out of the other party, it suggests that he has alienated a large swath of the Jamaican people, of Jamaican society. And we have to be vigilant and see where he's going to take this to. This is what the Prime Minister is saying. We don't really need an opposition because our supporters hold us to account. In fact, our supporters are our staunchest constructive critics, he said at a party meeting honoring workers in Hanover Eastern. This is what the Prime Minister is saying, that he doesn't need the opposition party, right? Well, if he does need the opposition party and they play a big role in Jamaica, can you imagine independent, those who are independent, who belong to independent parties, who are just neutral? He doesn't need to listen to them, because all he needs to listen to are the people who are his staunchest followers and who will not give him the criticism that he thinks he needs. They will tell him what he wants to hear. They will tell him, just like the Garfield Higgins, they will tell him what he wants to hear. Okay? The PNP organized a protest to show its opposition to the appointment of Chartered Accountant Dennis Chung to head the Financial Investigations Division. The PNP claims Chung is not qualified, and comments he made last year about a report on Holness's finances make his appointment inappropriate. The report has been referred to the FID. That is something very interesting that the Prime Minister here is saying. And we have to be always on the alert, or always on our P's and Q's in terms of how these politicians behave, how they act, and the words that they utter from their mouths. We must be alert. But oftentimes, because we want to win, we are in this winning game, and people are telling me that I'm flip-flopping. Flip-flopping for what? Because whomever wins, Jamaica is going to be the same. Whomever wins the election next year, Jamaica, or this year, or whenever it's called, whenever the election is called, whomever wins, Jamaica remains the same. Nothing is going to fundamentally change. In fact, we're seeing that the world is changing while we are going backward, we're regressing. Because a lot of what is happening in the geopolitical realm stand to affect us and affect us negatively. But we're not discussing these things. We're not discussing the war on Iran. We're not discussing what is happening with the Trump administration and the tariffs. We are just reactive. So if Trump comes out tomorrow and say he's going to impose the percent tariffs on Jamaica, then our ruling classes begin to react to what he says, and then their 9-day wonder, and there is no planning. There is no short-term and long-term planning in terms of how we are going to move ahead, how we are going to move from here onward beyond Trump's tariffs or whatever reactionary policy in the world. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. We behave like children that is at the moment that we respond. We don't look ahead. We're not visionary. And without vision, the people perish. And our leaders are not visionary leaders. And I heard Mark Golding. Perhaps it wasn't Mark Golding. It could have been from Dr. Dayton Campbell, or one of those top-notch officials in the PNP party. And that person was suggesting that if the PNP government should win the election, that they would ensure in their first term that Jamaica eradicates illiteracy in their first term. Now, is that even feasible? It's not feasible to eradicate illiteracy, the high rates of illiteracy in Jamaica. And recently, I think there was a report coming out of the Gleaner in which they suggested that at Pembroke Hall Secondary School, or high school, whatever you call it there, that in grade 7, 70%, I think it was grade 7, 70% of those students, that batch, the grade 7 batch, are not able to read. 70%. Now, it was in light of that, and I think now that PNP official wanted to make it political, so he's, of course, blaming the JLP, but we can't blame the JLP for the high rates of illiteracy in Jamaica. Yes, some blame should be laid at their feet, because had they attacked the problem in 2016, we could have seen a greater reduction in our illiteracy rate. Okay, but they didn't attack the problem because that was not their agenda. And I was talking to somebody recently, and in Jamaica, and they were telling me, I said that both governments don't care. Both governments, both parties do not care about education in Jamaica. And she was saying, yeah, the Andrew Holness cares about education. How? What has he done to suggest that Andrew Holness cares about education? Because he has said he cares, right? But it's not what he says, it's what he does, and the policies that we are seeing that are being implemented. And so far, for the last 10 years, in which Dr. Andrew Holness has been in power, we have not seen the construction of any major school or schools. They are talking about STEM program, but how can you talk about STEM program when you have such a high rate of illiteracy in Jamaica? Right? We're moving ahead. We follow everything the so-called first world countries are doing when we are fourth world country. We have to move in stages. And we have not yet passed beyond the decades of the 60s and the 70s. We're still there in the decades of the 60s and the 70s. And, I was reading Garfield Higgins' article last Sunday, and in which he was, of course, lambasting, okay? He was renouncing what the PNP did in their protest action against Dennis Chung and his becoming the technical director of the FID. Now, he was suggesting that he is bemused at the fact that in 2025, here you have the political parties busing people to their conferences and to their protest actions, their protest events. And he referenced what the PNP did, as I suggested, in protesting against the appointment of Dennis Chung as the technical director of the Federal Investigations Division. Now, what he suggested is that the PNP supporters there, and perhaps Higgins has a point here. As much as he's biased, I think that he does have a point. He's saying that large number of the people who were protesting did not know what they were protesting against or about. They didn't know. They were just there to jump and dance and sing, because perhaps many of them were paid to be there. Oftentimes, they're paid by their MPs to be there just to support, just to show some support for what the higher ups are doing, the higher authorities, their leaders. But they don't even know, they don't understand the political climate. They don't understand the political environment. And there are lots of us too when I see the comments on my videos who they do not understand how politics work in Jamaica. You only think that all you want to do is to see your leader win and your party win the election. But let me say something to you. They win, not you. And that is why Jamaica will continue to be a forever backward society. A forever backward society, right? Because it is they who are winning. It is they who are winning, not you nor your children. Not you or your children are winning that game. And I hope you understand that. We have to learn now, sun is coming in, have to learn to understand what is happening and how that is going to impact us. Right? We have to know. We have to learn these things. So Higgins is suggesting that the PNP did not know. And he says in his article here, PNP supporters were bussed into National Hero Circle to demonstrate. Media reports say that I have seen some of the footage. No well-thinking Jamaican should feel comfortable that in 2025, Jamaican citizens are still being so used and staged, right? They're still being used and staged. And he's right. And being staged means that it's not real. They don't even know why they're there. And that is the point of his article, that in today's 21st century, in 2025, Jamaicans are still being used and staged. Okay? The preservation, I think it should also be a basic requirement too, that supporters who are loaded into buses and other vehicles are also told why. He's saying that they need to be told why they are going to be at whatever conference they're about to be, particularly if they are protesting. It is very sad that you have protesters and they don't know what they are protesting about or against. And I'm not surprised. And sometimes it could be that they might know, but they can't express what they are protesting against. They don't have that sort of linguistic ability, the linguistic capacity to articulate their sentiments. So, me no know, me just die of it, drink some liquor and jump, right? That is the sort of backward society that we are nurturing in Jamaica, and nobody cares. Nobody cares because I saw things set up and I saw it have to go. Okay? That is how we think as a people. This does not require any outlay of millions either. As soon as the vehicles are comfortably occupied, one or two leaders could simply board each and have a short talk that outlines who, what, when, where, why, and how. And he's right. The leaders are not communicating. And they too, when they go to dumb down the people and they're talking in patois, they're not saying anything. It's almost like they're talking to the wall. When Dr. Dayton Campbell and these people stand up to speak, right, to the people, and when they're using the Creole, it's almost like they're talking down to the people because there's nothing that they're saying. Because you know that the policy stances and the policies are not really in patois, right? And the economic policies coming out of Washington, D.C. are not written in the Jamaican dialect, in the Jamaican vernacular. It is not. They're not. Okay? So when they're trying now to translate, the translation is lost. There's no way of expressing it. It's almost like when you're translating something from Greek into Spanish, and some words might not that exist in Greek, might not exist in Spanish, and vice versa. And you have to find ways in which you can express it the best way. But that requires a lot of thinking to be able to express an idea that does not have an equivalent vocabulary or lexicon in the other language. And you have to express in a way that the person who speaks the other language understands it very well. And sometimes it's not fully translated. Sometimes the translation is lost. People don't understand that just learning language is not just learning words, it's learning the culture and people's way of thinking. You're just knowing vocabulary and saying this word means that, and that doesn't mean that's just something to do with translation. It's to understand people's thinking. And that's what I'm suggesting, that the language that we're speaking in Jamaica, and that is why Andrew Holness can become a dictator, or if Mark Golding wants to become one, they can easily become dictators in Jamaica, because our people do not have proper language development. Okay? So they're not able to challenge them on what they say. Even on my videos now, even what I'm doing here, and I'm trying to let you, I'm calling out the PNP, I'm calling out the GLP when they err, and when they're not doing what they're supposed to do. In many cases, they're not. They're working for the ruling class of Jamaica, the economic elites, the financial elites. But you don't want to hear that. What you want to hear is me saying that I am GLP and I'm Andrew Holness, me vote for. And our Mark Golding and Marky G, me vote for. And if I don't stick on one line, if I don't stay on one path, then I'm a flip-flopper. Because you can't think. You can't think. And because you can't think, you can't react appropriately to my videos. Right? Somebody was suggesting to me that, oh, it seems like you're behind because Dr. Horace Chang is the best minister of the national security we've ever had. Because haven't you seen the data? The data. Oh, yeah. And who creates the data? Right? Who do you think creates the data? And do you think that they are going to give you, especially in an election year, data that doesn't look good so that you can vote for them? They don't care if it's an election year or not. If it is outside of an election year, they don't care. They probably will give you some truth. But it's an election year now, the data, all the data is going to be great. Education is great. Economy is great. And crime and violence, nonetheless. But I might read, yes, I've interacted with the data. It doesn't say that I'm convinced. Because I know, just like if you tell me that those 70% of those students who can't read at Pembroke Hall High School, I know that that thing is not going to be solved overnight. If you come and tell me tomorrow that those 70% of students are now reading after 3 weeks, I don't believe you. I am not going to believe you. I'm just not going to believe you. And reading at their grade level, I think they're reading, but they're not reading at their grade level. They might be reading at the grade 3 level. But if you're telling me now that after 3 weeks, they're now reading at the grade 7 level, I don't think I will believe you. It's probably grade 4, maybe. Okay? But don't behave as if we are what we are when we are not what we are. Okay? And we have to look carefully at what Dr. Andrew Holness is doing. But Garfield Higgins is right that in the 21st century, in 2025, we have not grown up. We're still bossing people and they don't know what we are about. But hear what Garfield is saying and his solution, and I don't agree with him here when he's suggesting that we should exercise our civic right by just voting. That we're just going to vote our way into prosperity. Okay? And oftentimes after the elections are finished, it's over. They do whatever they want to do. Nobody holds them to account. Garfield Higgins go back and he's still at JLP. He doesn't call them out. And the other people who belong to the other party, they do the same. And because of that, Jamaica continues to lag behind and to wallow in the dirt and the mud, right? That is what it is. And will it forever be? And these leaders don't care, right? Because they have already fulfilled their dreams and aspirations. So Garfield Higgins is saying, do your civic duty. Democracy dies in broad daylight when our leaders prey upon the ignorance of especially ordinary Jamaicans and or weaponize ignorance to promote deceitful objectives. And he's right. This is a staple in Jamaica, and it is true. An informed electorate is the lifeblood of a functional democracy. He's right. You have to give Higgins here. He's spot on. And I'm going to repeat that statement of Garfield Higgins. An informed electorate is the lifeblood of a functional democracy. Democracy also dies in broad daylight when those of us, especially who have benefited from education at great public expense, divorce ourselves from the electoral process, and in so doing, allow especially those who are blinded by loyalty to party to decide Jamaica's future. Two things here, Garfield Higgins, and those who are watching. One, the large majority of our people who have been through the educational process and the educational system are not educated. They have been schooled. And there's a difference between being schooled and being educated. I think many people in the world are reflectors of other men's thoughts. And true education means that we are able to think independently. I'm not suggesting that you're going to disagree with everything everybody says, but we should be able to analyze the system and reason from cause to effect. And many of us have not yet done that. We can't do that. Because what has happened is that we go to school, you memorize what you're told to memorize. And you believe in what your professors have said because, after all, they are the so-called experts. And you think that is so. And they've published numbers of books according to what they've suggested. And you believe them. And they're spoken of very highly. But what if they did not understand the system? What if they erred? Because they're human, and to be human is to err. To err is to be human. And many of our professors don't understand the world in which they live. They're also reflectors of other men's thoughts. In fact, in today's world, and this has been happening for decades, you can't publish anything that is not a part of the orthodoxy of the academy. You have to follow certain rules, certain guidelines, certain patterns. If not, your ideology will be totally dismissed, and you might not even become the professor that you want to become. Even when you're writing your thesis or your dissertation, you're challenged not to veer away from what is the established norm. And that is what people have. So people having PhDs and masters don't mean anything. It just means that they went through a system of schooling, but they're not necessarily educated if they're not able to think outside of the box. And we find in Jamaica that the large majority of people coming out of the University of the West Indies, coming out of our major universities there, University of Technology, cannot think. Right? They can't think. They're just mere reflectors of other men's thoughts. So whatever you hear the major analysts saying, you say to, without questioning. It is unquestionable what Dennis Young says, or what Professor when he was alive. What's his name? The one who spoke like he was from Great Britain. Ralston, whatever his name was. Okay? Yeah. You just simply imitate what they say. Like birds, right? Jamaica has suffered dearly for decades because too many among us are simply too lazy or maybe too stoosh, he's saying, to go to a polling station and do our civic duty. Well, what has happened as a consequence? He's asking that question. Those whose votes can be bought and sold, they decide the direction of Jamaica. But they're not the ones, Garfield Higgins, who decide. The voting is just a formalized system through which the politicians and the ruling class give you, Garfield Higgins, the illusion of democracy, the illusion that you control what happens in Jamaica when you don't. The Americans are just finding that out for themselves. The greatest democracy, the greatest republic that has ever been formed in the history of the world, the mightiest nation in the most impactful, the richest country in the Western Hemisphere. Its citizens, well, some of them, because most of them still are dumb too, right? Its citizens are finding out now that America is not a democracy. The people is not the government of, for, and by the people. It is the government of, for, and by the oligarchs. They have now found, at least some of them who are reading and who are exposing themselves to information and are empowering their minds, have found out that the country is not being run in America's interests, the interests of the citizens. It's being run in the interests of the ruling elites. Now, the ruling elites don't have any nationality. They say they're Americans or Jamaicans or wherever, but they don't care. Their nationality and their patriotism is money, right? That's what their patriotism is. It's not about being loyal to a certain country. So when you see the trade wars between China and the US, and you think that, oh, it's Trump is representing Americans and representing you, he's not representing you. He's representing you in the sense that, yes, you are there under his leadership and whatever happens will affect you, but he doesn't care. And if he can, behind the scenes, come up with some agreement that will be beneficial to the ruling elites, yet be very, very terrible for the ordinary American, they are going to sign off on that agreement. The same thing with Jamaica. I hope you understand that. So it doesn't have anything to do with Americans. It has to do with a major fight among the global leaders and the ruling elites of the world. And I have told you on many occasions that during the US Civil War, that the Southerners, the white Southerners, who thought that they were on the side of white Americans and there is these black people who are trying to take over and all of that, the nonsense that was being diffused there. And they thought they were fighting a civil war to preserve America's racial superiority. All right? They thought that's what they were doing. And when they went there, and after 2 years and they were being killed, and they realized, and these were not educated, sophisticated white Americans at the time in the South, they realized that this war is not for us. This war isn't about us. These are the bankers fighting their wars, and they're including us in it, and we are not going to fight anymore. Do you know that? That is why the South lost. That's one of the reasons the South lost, because the able-bodied men, when they realized that they were being used by the Southerners to fight their own war, and they were living in poverty, and they didn't care about them, they stopped. And then it was when the Southerners decided to recruit the slaves. But by the time they had recruited the slaves, the North had already won. All right? So if these people who were unsophisticated, these white people, what you call white people, Southern white people in the United States, okay, during the US Civil War, and 2 years into the battle, they realized that this war is not for us. This war is really for the elites. And they're sacrificing us for their cause. It's the same thing happening right now with these trade wars. It's not about you. Or the immigration wars or whatever. It's not about you. It's about you in the sense that they're there to exploit you. And you have to take back the realm of government and say that no to what you're doing. But if we think that the government is still acting on our behalf, we are not educated. We are not educated. We don't know how this world runs, and that it's a big corporate structure. Somebody was suggesting to me the other day too that America, yes, America is a democratic republic, and she's also a corporate enterprise. You can't be both. You can't be both. Because if you are a corporate enterprises, their major ambition, their major agenda is to make a profit. Government is not in the business to make profit. Government is in the business to take care of its people. and to make sacrifices to protect the economic, social, and political interests of its people, of its citizens. That is why they were sent there. Okay, that is the reason why they're there also to guard against the profiteering of corporations in terms of exploiting their people, because that was what slavery was all about. The government was not protecting the rights of Americans when they had slavery. And that is what Abraham Lincoln said. You can't have a country that is half slave and half free, because eventually it's going to become fully enslaved. Right? So slavery did not align with Americans or America's liberal democracy or liberal Republican form of government. And by Republican, I don't mean the party. I mean a Republican form of government where the government protects all its citizens, including majority and minority, and people who have different belief systems. Okay? That is what we need to understand. But I think that Andrew Holness seems to be passing his nest, right? Seems to be passing his nest when he's suggesting that he does need an opposition party because his followers, his GLP followers, are his staunchest critics, and they're already critiquing his role and what he's doing. That is nonsense, Mr. Prime Minister, and it's irresponsible information. And in light of what is happening in the world, in light of what is happening in Jamaica, I think that that is a statement that should be retracted. That is a statement that should be retracted because you are going in for, well, you are applying, you are vying for a consecutive third term in office. You should not be saying that right now because third term, can mean dictatorship. We don't know. We don't know where you're carrying us to. And we know that Jamaicans are not the ones giving you the mandate. This is just a pretense. It's just a party. And, to give people the illusion of inclusion when they're not included in the entire process. So don't come and tell us now that we don't need opposition. You need opposition from the PNP. You need opposition from those who are apolitical. You need opposition from those who are independent. You need opposition from a third party like the likes of Joseph Patterson. You need that sort of opposition. So don't tell us the PNP is not the only opposition you have there. They are the two major ones. Yes, that's the major one, I should say. But there are other opposition, independents, third parties, those who are neutral. These are opposition and they should be able to oppose. And you should be able to listen if we are really a democracy as we say we are. I don't think so, but that is what we say in theory. So let's even try, unless he's like Trump now, trying to terminate the pretense of democracy, because that's what Trump has done. He has taken off the mask that America was wearing all over the years, that she is a democracy. And the first term he did it. And people were all like, oh, America is going on the toilet. But America was already going on the toilet under Obama, under Bush, under Clinton. But you didn't see it because the mask was fully on. Now that Trump has unmasked the United States military empire, then people are now beginning to cry and to scream. They don't like what they see. It looks very hideous, and it is. But if you were reading and you were looking behind what is behind the mask, you would have seen that hideous face. And many people around the world, including in Latin America and in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe, they would have already seen the US unmasked and the US dictatorial disposition, the US's dictatorial face. They would have seen that. They know it. They've seen it before. And some of them who are living now in the United States are telling US citizens that the same things that happened in our country just before the Holocaust, just before all of these communist revolutions, are the same things, are the same tendencies, are the same goalpost signs that are happening in the United States of America. Americans are not seeing that. They are only seeing that they're going to their jobs, they're coming back home, and they're going to their parties, and that is what life should be about. But we also have to be careful, all of us, whether you're in America or in Jamaica, about future dictators and dictatorships. And what happened 5 years ago, I can't say, but we should have learned from those events. But many of us still have not yet learned that it's moving forward. The machine is moving forward and moving at full speed. That many of us, when we shall have gotten to that side, are going to be getting cardiac arrest. Why? Because we never expected that this would have ever happened in our shores, and the people that we think are so beautifully clad and they speak so nicely are people who are going to lead us into a country of dictatorship, full dictatorship. Should we not call them out? Should we not be alert? Make sure now that you're liking the video, you're subscribing to the channel so that we can grow, because we need to have our politicians be held accountable. They need to be held accountable. And many of our media houses are not holding them accountable. And Andrew Holness should be receiving a lot of pushback against what he has just articulated in the Jamaica Gleaner about not needing an opposition. That's not his, to say. That is not, he doesn't have the power to say that. He has inherited a system that was way before him, at least, well, it was there before him, but well, not way, because he was born in the 70s, and Jamaica became independent in 1962, but it was there before he was born. He inherited that system, right? And because we have an opposition party, that's why he was able to win the election, because he was in opposition himself. And if the PNP were saying that, then he would not have won the election, because they would say, well, we don't need a third party. The PNP just needs to be in power forever. Just like he's now suggesting, we don't need a PNP. But Andrew Holness forgot that he was in opposition, his party, for a long time. And if the PNP had behaved that way, what would he be saying? He would be telling them that they're dictators. And maybe he would be having a large protest, because when he was in opposition, he liked to have also protested. Okay, so that is my rant for today. I hope that you have gleaned something from what I've just said, and you will take Andrew Holness's words seriously, and you will hold him to account, so that we can preserve at least some element of what we call Jamaica's democracy. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe, like the video, so the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. See you in another video. All the best. Ciao.